Oh yeah, who are you? But good fun, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
Cool,
you.
cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you. See you
guys.
guys. See you very soon. Yep.
Bye.
Yep. So we have
The
Dan.
happiest Englishman on earth.
Yeah.
Or not really. Not judging by his reaction.
I think, if Gurkirat is there, maybe we can add him back if he's still on. Otherwise, Dan, first thoughts.
Well, I mean, what a match full of drama. I think for me, ultimately, I just got regret that Shaheen Afridi got injured because I think that would have really created this incredible finish to the match. And following those 5 balls from Iftikhar, which Pakistan had no option but to bowl Iftikhar in that situation against the left-handers.
Yeah.
It was the only thing they could do, but that's what changed the game. We saw Stokes. I think when Stokes came into bat, England needed less than the run a ball, and then when he at one point it got up towards 8.5, and you were thinking, okay, well if there's a wicket now, that's when it could get to tens, and that's when it starts to get a little bit out of hand against a very good bowling attack, and then disaster happened for Pakistan with Afridi's injury, and it was such a shame to see because Pakistan's bowling was unbelievable, out of this world. Their pace bowling, I thought, was so good today, and I think that it just robbed the game of a final conclusion, a tighter match. But no, I'm pleased for England. I'm pleased for the players. I think there's a few ways you can frame the Stokes innings. I think that the question is whether he would have done anything differently if it was a 170 chase, and I'm not sure there's a great deal of evidence to suggest that he would have done. And you can't take that away from him, I suppose. And there's also the counter argument to say that his approach ensured that the match went down to the last couple of overs rather than get finished, say, in 15 or 16. So, there's a few ways you can frame that as well. But overall, I think this match and this tournament and this knockout stages as well, and we'll go on to this, I think, when we talk about some sort of learnings from the tournament, is, look, there's not a great deal of difference between 4 or 5 teams in terms of ability in these tournaments, and there's a lot of variance in the knockout stages. And Shaheen Shah Afridi's injury is a great example of that. That's the variance which decides make the tournament.
And even after that injury, that the first ball that Iftikhar bowled, which Stokes almost hit to Babar. Yes. I mean, so that's the margin that we are talking about. And and see, we were discussing. While you were when you didn't join that. I mean, there are something that we just an Excel sheet can't measure, and which is the aura of players like Stokes. I mean, it's just that stars do tend to align in their favor come these big occasions. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting point because that's the narrative, right? We know that's the narrative. That's what the commentators are always saying. I mean, if I had a pound every time a commentator called Ben Stokes a big game player, I think I'd be a millionaire. But actually, whether it is that's the case or not is another matter. Yeah. So for me now, I'm quite interested in sort of doing some research into big matches and seeing which players do have this so-called inherent clutch ability in big matches, or whether it is just a bit of a myth. Let's see.
Yeah. Awesome.
So let's go. I mean, let's revisit the final. Do you think Josh Butler is on point with some of the decisions he made, or was it just Pakistan not capitalizing? With the bad. They definitely had a bad start. They had terrible line and lengths, but Pakistan could not put it away for boundary. No. So do you think that's Pakistan's fault, or do you think Butler captained it perfectly?
I think the Stokes and Wokes looked a little bit nervous up front, which is fairly understandable. You say Pakistan didn't capitalise, and again we have this sort of very slow start from Rizwan and Babar, where between them they scored 47 off 42 balls with just 3 boundaries, and ultimately that can put pressure on the rest of the team and assist dismissals, if you like, in some way, shape or form, because of the pressure they've put on the team. It's got 3 boundaries in 42 balls. That's over a third of your resources gone for just 3 boundaries. That like the winning boundary, the average boundaries for a winning team in this tournament is about 20 boundaries. So your other players have got to find 17 or 78 balls. That's tough, very tough. And yeah, Shan Masood, Sharif Khan tried their best. Mohamed Harris was unlucky trying to play a bit more attacking, but I think Pakistan's batting was what we expected. Really, Pakistan's batting was Pakistan's batting, and they've got a long tail. I don't think for 1 minute Mohamed Wasim was a number 8. I think he's about a number 10. So there's. I don't think anything surprised us that much with Pakistan. I think Sam Curran was absolutely outstanding, and I think I tweeted this earlier. I'll be amazed if he's not the highest sale price in the next IPL mini auction. Just genuinely stumped.
Dan, in your opinion, who's the player of the tournament? I think we kind of thought it would be between Shadab and Sam Curran. So would you still lean towards Shadab irrespective of what happened on the night, or do you think kind of it swayed towards Curran after his performance from the big occasion today? Shadab was equally brilliant, I guess. So
I mean, you look at how these awards are generally given out. There's probably going to be a bit of narrative in these awards, and there's probably a very high correlation between the winner of player of the tournament and the winner of the event, or what nationality they come from. So you can see Sam Curran definitely having a good chance of getting it. And I also kind of wonder a little bit, well, maybe he didn't quite do enough, but I think there might have been a bit of narrative around Buttler as well. But I think maybe if he got sort of 60 or 70 today, that would have probably been enough for him to push him for that as well.
And Naseem Shah's spell, the best ever spell, wicketless spell, probably.
Yeah. So the one over that he bowled with no reward was unbelievable, super impressive. And am I right in thinking I saw yesterday he got released by his PSL franchise, which is something of a surprise. Yeah.
Maybe he not sure. Maybe he wanted to be in the auction, or
no, they don't.
We can have it
in the draft.
Draft. Sorry. But so Dan,
I want to say one thing over here. Of all the T20 finals that have been there, T20 World Cup finals, only 2 have had where the team has won while batting first. 2007 and 2012. So this whole thing of batting first in a pressure game, at least in T20s, can be called a myth.
We saw that in this year's IPL final as well. I mean, I was very surprised when Sanju Samson opted to bat. But
I think there's some cases where it's a little bit more applicable. So, for example, a final in England at Lords, I would definitely lean towards batting first because Lords has got quite a big bat first bias anyway. So you can understand why someone would do it there. But I think that's right. Generally, it is a myth, but unless there's something which is really venue specific to lean towards batting first, then I would you go down that road. Otherwise you treat the situation as merits. And in the subcontinent, you'd always want to chase pretty much anyway.
So Dan, how do you see this England T20 side now evolving? I'm assuming that winning the T20 World Cup is probably as good as it can get for most of the senior players in the side. I'm talking about, let's say, Stokes, Rashid, Moeen to a lesser extent, and I mean, Wokes is still probably in the mid-30s, I guess, but most of these players have Jordan, and most of these players are on the wrong side of the 30s, or they're integral part of the test side, so that may also play into the narrative. So, do you think the next World Cup is still 2 years away? So maybe the next bilateral series England play T20 cricket, they will probably start looking towards building a side with an eye on 2024, or do you still feel some of these players might carry on? Given, let's say, Rashid doesn't play Test cricket, Stokes has given up 50-over cricket, so in your opinion, how do you think it will play out in the coming months/years?
Well, look at this. I would say that only of this team who played today, only Stokes and probably Sam Curran would be in England's probably their first choice 11 right now in Test cricket. I'm talking about. So the workload management, I think, is is not a major issue for a group of now white ball specialists to a large extent. Now, look, integrating new players into an aging group is probably one of the most difficult things that a selector or a coach has to do. You know, I'm a big football fan. I'm sure you guys probably are as well. Remember Alex Ferguson when he was manager of Manchester United? He had to do this like 4 times over that 20 years, like 4 different eras where he's integrating new players and getting older players out or changing things up. And England have got to do that. Was Phil Salt's inclusion over Dawid Malan perhaps the first sign of that, for example? Because I think Malan was fit for the final, but they kept with Salt. And even though he only got 10 off 9 balls, it's still very valuable experience to play in a World Cup final moving forward. So yeah, you can kind of see that maybe. Brooke has obviously come in fairly recently as well. Still, probably, I think, has a bit to show at international level, but I definitely think that he's talented enough to do that. And then bowling-wise, I mean, I'd be surprised if we saw a lot more of Jordan after this tournament, especially when Archer comes back as well, if he's fully fit. Adil Rashid ended the tournament well after a tricky start, but he's not getting any younger. I would say they might try and get 2 more years out of him and wait until Rayhan Ahmed is a little bit older before getting him into the group. But then it all depends on Ray's progress over the next year or so, because talent-wise, he's got everything. And he backs. He's higher up the order.
So, Dan, my next question is from an overall tournament lens. Just wanted to pick your mind around the few trends that you would have observed in this World Cup.
Yes.
So I just want your opinion on some trend that you knew that this is how T20 works and that is exactly how it worked out. And just I'm quite interested in few of the anomalies as well, that this is something which was unique to this tournament, which doesn't usually apply to the T20 game.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of notable trends that I've picked out. First of all, I talked a lot over the last few years about this 60-40 rule. If you win 60% of your games, you've got a pretty decent chance, very high chance of qualifying. And 2, if you can be 60-40 in a knockout match afterwards, then that's as good as you're likely to get. Unfortunately, in this format, it does only ensure that if you're 60-40 in 2 knockout games, you win 36% of the time, which still shows how difficult it is to win a knockout match. And again, those variants and fine margins that we've already talked about a few minutes ago. So for me, that notable trend is the kind of continuation of 4 or 5 teams all being capable of beating each other in knockout matches, between sort of 40-60 and 60-40 against each other in these knockout matches. And that shows you how difficult it is to win knockout events even when you're a very strong team. If you're 60-40 in 2 matches in a row, you're still underdogs to win the tournament. You're still going to win the points more than 1 in 3 times. So getting to the knockouts should be the first objective for any of the major teams. And then, unfortunately, you are going to need a little bit of variance on your side, and we've seen that over this week. The variance and a bit of luck really is often what's needed in these tournaments. The other notable trend that is probably going to be a little bit less popular for some listeners is India's brand of cricket, and how regimented they are in terms of their tactics and their selection and how they structure up, and how they're almost trying to pick the best 11 players rather than the 11 who's most suited to the job in hand. And for me, I think that they really need to go back to the drawing board and work out, 1, what strategy they want to implement, and then 2, picking the players who are suitable for that strategy rather than picking the players and then worrying about some form of a strategy. So yeah, that needs to evolve, absolutely, in my opinion. I'm sure it's an uncomfortable thing to admit, but I'm sure a lot of people will admit that as well from in the supporters' base as well. In terms of overall learnings and differences in this tournament to others, for me, the conditions and the venues were markedly different to what we might see in other countries. In England or India or UAE, we would see a lot friendlier batting conditions. smaller boundaries. And we saw in this World Cup how useful running 2s and 3s were in Australia compared to other countries. I mean, a 3 in England in a T20 is basically unheard of. But here it's like it's not out of the question at all. And I think this was illustrated by the team who won the dot ball percentage count won more matches than the teams who won the boundary percentage count, which is basically unheard of in every other country. That's a real outlier. And so to show that maybe you do have to adapt your game plan a little bit. Maybe you do have to adapt your selection a little bit when you go to Australia. And for me, that was quite a nice learning, I think. For me, if I was ever in a position where I had to do some work in Australia, then I would definitely learn from that. So that was something that was a bit of an eye-opener for me for sure. The extent of which those 2s and 3s and the non-boundary run production, I suppose you could call it, super powerful in Australia.
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Gurkira.
No, I was just saying that. That point about boundaries and dot balls, it just comes down to also which venue you are playing at. A lot of it just comes down to that.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier as well, a lot of talk is about how England batters are ones who have a lot of intent. They're also very adaptive. They know when to play the situation. Like I was mentioning, before Dan came on. I don't know if Dan heard it. That if not for Stokes, then maybe someone like Malan could have played that anchor innings today. So they would have had one player doing that anyway.
Yes.
I mean, I had two small questions. So one basically is, do you attribute this England white ball success down to nailing the role definition? One is that, and then I want your opinion or comment on Moeen Ali, the leader, because he's been unsung, right? That people don't talk about. People talk largely about Josh Butler, but Moeen Ali has been doing. Since he's been part of the core group, I think his game has also improved to a level where he's turned out to be this key player. So on this.
Yeah, so first of all, I think tactically, I think England have probably grasped the ways to win T20 matches and tournaments more than, say, in India have. They've kind of, and there's stuff that I disagree with that England do, but I think that they understand the format a lot better than India.
If England were India, probably Joe Root would be playing in the T20 team.
with Milan and Stokes and probably another as well opening the batting too. Yeah.
I have a question here. So Sam Curran has been named the player of the tournament. I think it could have been Shadab. I think this bias of always awarding these awards to the team that has won is something that needs to be done away with, because like I've said previously, it is, and the individual can only contribute so much towards his team winning. At the end of the day, that individual also has to rely on what the other 10 players are doing. I just think, Shadab with the bat also made an impact, because he averaged, if I'm not wrong, he had an average of 24.5 at a strike rate of 168.9, along with scoring that 50 versus South Africa. That actually, put Pakistan's campaign on track. So I just and it's not that Shadab did poorly with the ball. 11 wickets at an average of 15 and economy rate of 6.34. So yeah, I think Shadab could have been the player of the tournament.
Well, this is what we were saying earlier about how there's always this narrative about whoever wins the tournament usually gets player of the tournament. There's no difference to man of the match or player of the match awards as well. Like 99% of the time they go to a player who's on the winning team rather than on the losing team, even though the player on the losing team probably 20% of the time is quite clearly the player of the day, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Anyway, I'll leave now. I'll leave now. I hope that's
fine. That's fine.
Has a lot to talk
about.
Yeah. So Dan, your thoughts on England's tactics and Moeen Ali?
Yeah, so tactics, I think we've sort of brushed on a bit with the fact that they've grasped the format more. They've worked the format out a lot more than India have, for example. Perhaps other countries like Australia, West Indies probably feel like they did work the format out and then it's gone away from them a little bit. But I think probably because they've panicked and they've gone down a poor route with selection as well. With regards to Mo, I mean, obviously I work with Mo. I know Mo. We worked together at Birmingham Phoenix in the 100, and I've only got positive things to say about him. Great human being, great guy, quite quiet guy, but a really, really good leader at the same time in terms of that he gets his points across in a very, very succinct way, and gives the players the belief that they can go out and perform, and there's no consequences for failure. We'd rather fail taking the brave option rather than fail taking the fearful option. So for me, yeah, I think he's an excellent leader, and definitely a great sort of second in command for Josh Butler right now.
No, I just probably a wild comparison, but the kind of arc Moeen Ali has been on, it reminds me of kind of what Granit Xhaka has been doing in Arsenal. Like nobody, like in the last couple of years, people have really tended to respect what he's offering as a leader, what he's bringing to the group and bringing the group together. So in that way, it kind of drawing slight parallels there. Being an Arsenal fan, obviously, but
those are big Liverpool fans. Maybe you could say make the equivalent of Jordan Henderson or someone like that as well.
Yeah. So Dan,
Dan is a Spurs fan, so that works out well.
Okay. Damn it. Okay. So Dan, I just wanted to listen to your thoughts about Matthew Mott, the coach. Like, have you had a chance to work with him in the past, or what is the general word about him? Like, is he someone who's very high on analytics and data, or is he more like a man manager who just leaves it to the players? Like, let's say compared to the previous coach England had,
Chris Silverwood,
and even Bayliss for that matter.
But because he keeps winning trophies.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. And first of all, I don't know Matthew Mott at all, so it's really, really difficult for me to pass any comment or judgment on what he's like as a character or as a tactician or strategist. What I do know is that, I mean, look, he's won a lot of trophies. That's obviously a huge positive. However, he's also been the coach of Australia women's team, who are like head and shoulders above every other team, I mean, it's like quite difficult to lose when you're Australia's national team.
Yeah. I can coach that team.
Is it Pep Guardiola of cricket?
Yeah.
Is it Pep Guardiola of cricket?
So I mean, but then obviously he's won this tournament as well as coach. So that's another thing on his CV. So let's see. I mean, I don't know how much impact he had because obviously he's taken over in quite short notice over since Silverwood left. So let's see how he. I think the biggest test for him now is to how he evolves this group over the next 2, 3, 4 years, and the next couple of World Cup cycles, and that's going to be, I think, the real test for him in terms of him as a coach and the skills that he's got.
Yep.
So I mean, is it fair to say that the data-driven approach is something that is differentiating England from others because they've adopted this data method like before any team can even imagine, right? Do you think that is where they have a slight edge over others? I mean, a huge edge over others.
And they've not adopted to a level that probably someone like you would like, but still they are ahead of other teams, and that is making them better than the competition.
Look. You're right, Samesh. Certainly not to a level that I think that they could do. I genuinely actually think the reputation of being a very data-driven team is a little bit overstated. I still think maybe they're more data-driven than perhaps some other countries, but I don't think it's like the cricket equivalent of Oakland Athletics or anything like that. Definitely not the case. And yeah, look, I think that if England are ahead of everyone else in a data perspective, I actually think that that's a real indictment of the rest of the countries and how much they've basically closed their eyes to this massive competitive advantage.
Yeah. All right. So Dan, just last two questions before we wrap this up.
One more question from my part.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about one player in particular. Jason Roy. So, is it? I mean, do you think they will now prefer Salt as the opener? I mean, Hales, I assume, will be the number one. So, just trying to think what will happen to the T20 team going forward. Barstow is obviously still there.
Yes.
He kind of missed out on this World Cup at the wrong time for him. Roy is still, he's dropped, and he was probably the favorite to make the squad a couple of months ago, but now he's dropped. So kind of Hales and Salt have popped up. So what does it mean for someone like Roy and Barstow as well? Like, do you see him continuing to play in the middle order, or now that Brook is there, Livingston is there, and all these, it's completely crowded over there. So what do you think of these two players in particular?
I mean, I don't think that that's a really good example of how much talent there is in the English batting pool right now. I mean, and you've only mentioned a few names, and there's a dozen other names you could really talk about in terms of having the future upside to be competing for a role in this team. Unfortunately for Jason Roy, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for him to get back into the team. He's 32 years old now. He's come off this year. I mean, his numbers are there's no way you can polish these numbers. They're extremely poor. He had a really disappointing 100 for himself as well, and obviously Alex Hales has come into the side and done pretty well. I think Phil Salt is clearly the preferred choice from the management as a backup batter, backup opener. And then you've got players such as Will Jacks, Will Smead, who are going to be playing a lot of overseas leagues this winter, and could easily put their name in the hat as well for some national team selections. So there's a lot of players competing, and it shows that you've got to carry on putting those performances in, otherwise people will catch up with you. With regards to Bairstow, I mean, Gurkharat talked earlier on about maybe there was a couple of other players who could have played that innings that Stokes played, tough out of difficult conditions, and score some tough runs. And I think Bairstow definitely could have done that as well. And I don't think that Harry Brook has done quite enough to firm up his place in that lineup ahead of Bairstow. So I'm sure that I mean, Johnny Bairstow is an excellent player, as I'm sure everyone's aware of, and probably a better player of spin, I'd say, than Brook. So I'm sure that England will still have plenty of time for Johnny Bairstow when he recovers from his injury. But exciting for England, I think, in terms of that depth that they've got in the batting group.
I see a Bairstow Brook tussle in Tests and T20 for the same position.
And one more, like you can say probably yes or no. Do you think do you see Stokes unretiring from ODI cricket and just playing the 2023 World Cup? Do you think that temptation might be there now?
I'm sure someone will ask him to do it.
Cool, Dan. So,
question.
Yeah, last two. Your 11 of the tournament.
Wow.
So you have that ready.
Nice.
Yeah, I do have it ready. So for the listeners, I got asked to do this about half an hour before the end of the match. so it's a little bit rushed. If I've forgotten someone, then I'm sorry. Okay, but a couple of positions are pretty tough. But I went with an opening partnership of Joss Buttler and Alex Hales, who I think were the best partnership in the tournament, probably. In terms of volume of runs, I couldn't ignore Virat Kohli at number 3 and Suryakumar Yadav, who I think was without a doubt batter of the tournament, at number 4. Glenn Phillips, a bit inconsistent, but he got the nod at number 5 with an abundance of all-rounders from 6 to 9 of Hardik Pandya, Sam Curran, Shadab Khan, and Wanindo Hasaranga. We can quibble about the batting order for that, I think, but that gives us some great batting depth.
But a lot of righties there, Dan. No. Just kidding.
And then I went for the bowlers. I went for Shaheen Shah Afridi and Anrik Nortje. So overall, sort of 6 bowling options. Keeper and Buttler, 2 spinners, 4 pacers. Back down to number 9. Shaheen can have a hit at 10. Quite like.
three paces, right? Shaheen,
Sam Curran, and
Sam Curran is also there.
So
cool, yeah.
So only two left-handers. Then.
Yeah.
Shaheen
Makes sense. So before we let you go, I mean, this tournament has been lit up by the teams who are outside the top 8. So which of those bottom 8 sides have impressed you the most, and why?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer, because I think that being really honest with you, that there's still a big gap between
Yeah,
them.
okay. Let me rephrase the question. Which of the sides who let's say Zimbabwe, Ireland, Netherlands, and even the others, based on what you saw, which of these teams at the moment have the highest ceiling?
So for me, out of those teams, I'd actually throw Afghanistan into the mix for the highest ceiling for sure.
But let's leave Afghanistan out because they are playing regularly. They're a full member. Yeah.
Possibly Ireland, but it's tough. I don't see any of them really having a great high ceiling. So they've all got holes with needs of improvement. Netherlands have got a decent bowling attack, but the batting just fills me with dread. Ireland rely on performances from their better players, such as Sterling and Josh Little. Yeah, and I think that the Little actually might get a sneak in as a base price player in the auction, maybe. Potentially.
Interesting.
And Zimbabwe, I just think that they fight hard. They lack quality, though, and their better players are well into their 30s now. So that's tough to see a ceiling there. Arza and Williams and stuff at the wrong end of the age curve. So that's tough to see from their perspective as well. So look, I want to see these new teams do well. The smaller teams do well. They've got to play bigger teams more. That's the key for them now, is to get that exposure against better players on a regular basis, and just be really, I genuinely think that they should be qualifying for every team for this tournament. So like Netherlands play against Scotland, Ireland, England, and a few other European countries to get maybe 3 spots for the World Cup or something like that, and India did the same, but then they'd have to play against Bangladesh and Afghanistan and Nepal and UAE and teams like that as well. And ultimately, it's probably a bit of an inconvenience for some of the bigger teams like India and England. But actually, that's how you grow the game. That's how you get these to get better, because they're playing against better players and they understand the standards that they need to get to be a world-class player. And we've seen that in football over the years. Like teams used to, England used to beat teams 8-0 in the 90s in qualifiers, and now it's like 2-0 because they've actually, it's because the gap's got smaller because teams have become better, smaller teams have become better, and I want to see that happen in cricket.
Do you remember Paul van Meekeren? He said that why can't these teams, bigger teams, stop over at Netherlands instead of playing the county? So do you see it happening, or do you not see it happening?
I'd like to see it happen, but I think commercial realities of the situation are that it's more difficult to happen. This is where I think maybe sometimes there needs to be more of a centralised organisation of fixtures as opposed to the boards doing it themselves.
Yeah. I think the best solution at situations like this is